Welcome to another edition of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. And this week we are going over UFC 267, the first of back-to-back pay-per-view weekends that we have coming up with the UFC. And this one is a banger, not to mention early start time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. So don't get caught napping or sleeping because this is going to be a banger of a card from beginning to end. And we got 15 fights to break down for you guys as well. So I can't wait to get to this card and give you guys my best betting tips. Before we go any further, though, let's get into the betting recap of the last event. And the last event was UFC Vegas 41, if I'm not mistaken. And I did not have a lock of the night play. However, we came to a near sweep in that card with the 5 plays that I ended up having for the card. So let's just start off at the top of the Bet MMA page here that I got. I had a unit and a half on Jonathan Martinez at plus 115 against Zviad, and I just saw through the absolute fraudulent nature of Zviad coming into the UFC, and a lot of people thinking that he should have been a big favorite in that fight. The only regret I have in regards to that bet is the fact that I didn't get to the tape earlier so that I could have got that plus 145, plus 150 that I saw a couple people get on Jonathan Martinez. He did a great job in terms of keeping the fight upright, and then from there did absolute work in the striking realm and was able to get that victory over Zviad. So good dog of the night cash for us there. Another dog of the night play we had was the Jeff Molina and Daniel Lacerda under 2.5, which I can't believe was at plus 118. The fact that it was even at plus money, I thought was absolutely crazy. And we got just that. Molina was able to dispatch of Lacerda early in that first round, and we cashed out 1 unit play at plus 118 for plus 1.18 units. Next, and you'd best believe for the next Daniel Lacerda fight, or Daniel De Silva, whatever the fuck you guys want to call him, I'm more than likely be playing the under again. Let's just throw that out there for you guys. Next up, we had a parlay. I actually went with 2 parlays for this card, and luckily both of them came through. The first of which had Francisco Trinaldo and Jessica Rose Clark. Let's start off on the Trinaldo side of things. I thought he won that fight even with the point deduction. I thought he did enough to win that fight. Takedowns, putting the pressure on Grant. I don't think he was in any crazy trouble in that fight, but I do think that Trinaldo was the right side even at that line. But I got a little bit greedy and played him in a parlay, and luckily it paid off for me, but I'm glad that it hit. And then obviously secondly, it was the Jessica Rose Clark fight. On the feet, didn't look good. Let's put it that way. I thought Edwards was definitely live on the feet, but luckily Jessica Rose Clark was able to land takedowns when she needed to, control the fight. Didn't do much from top position, which is fine with me as long as you're getting control time and still winning the round. And that's exactly what she ended up doing. So that parlay hits 1 unit at plus 191 for plus 1.19 units, plus 1.91 units, and that's another hit. And then the second parlay, which both of these fighters were in contention for being a lock of the night play for me. However, I had just slight concerns in regards to a couple things. So the first one being Tabitha Ricci. I was just a little bit concerned in regards to her takedown game, and it showed off in that fight that, she had some issues at times in terms of getting Oliveira down, and that was my main concern. If she wasn't able to get the takedown, would she still be able to remain competitive in the striking? I thought yes, and obviously enough to be able to parlay her here at 2 units, and luckily she did just that for us. So good one for her there. And then the Vettori side of things, right? You always got to worry about that early power from Paulo Costa, which gave me some pause here, even though Vettori has never been finished in his career. Very close fight. Obviously, I've seen some scorecards for Paulo Costa. However, I do think that Vettori deserved rounds 1, 3, and 4. I believe those were the 3 rounds that I gave him. But yeah, I thought he won at least 3 of those rounds. And then obviously take into consideration the point deduction. Got to be a Vettori fight, and luckily all the judges saw it that way as well. So we cashed out parlay 2 units at plus 121 for a profit of 2.41 units. And then lastly, the only loss we had on the night was the under 4.5 in that main event. I truly thought that if Costa was going to win, it was going to be an early knockout, or if Vettori was going to win, that Costa's cardio was going to drop off significantly, and we'd get Vettori to finish the fight in either round 3, 4, or 5. But we saw some crazy cardio from Costa, even to the extent of him winning round 5 against Vettori there. So a little bit of a misstep there, but that's minus 1.5 units, but I was happy to take the stab at minus 128. So I thought it was a decent spot pre-fight, but who knew that Paulo Costa was going to have his most success in round 5? I don't think anybody would have been able to predict that. All in all, plus 5.73 units. That's an 82% ROI on that card. That gives us a little bit of a bounce back from our previous event, which was a little bit of a stinker where we struck out completely on our official bets. I believe my predictions on the card, predictions on the card weren't that great either. But yeah, I'm happy with the performance from this past weekend, even without a lock of the night play. But as soon as that event wrapped up, I locked in my lock of the night play for UFC 267 because I knew that these lines were going to get steamed. And luckily, if you are on the Patreon, you got that play pretty much ASAP, and some of those lines are starting to get steamed at this point in time. Obviously, you guys are going to hear the breakdowns very shortly here, so you guys will be able to, decode what my plays are. But if you guys are not a part of the Patreon, my plays will be free on Friday. Just keep your eyes peeled on my social media platforms. But again, I do want to plug the Patreon. Link is in the description below. $5 a month. You guys get my picks as soon as I drop them. You guys also get eyes on the breakdowns way before the public does. So I drop that either in my best bets and props article as well as my video breakdowns, which I post early for the Patreon members. We have a great Discord community as well. Shout out to everybody in the Discord that keeps it lively. Like every time I look away for maybe a half an hour or so and I look back, the Discord is just lit. Everybody's keeping it busy and active, dropping tips, not just for MMA, but for other sports as well. So shout out to everybody in the Discord. And then, we got a ton of other perks on the Patreon as well. So make sure you guys go check that out. Best bang for your buck you're going to get on the market. Only $5 a month. That's it. It's $5 a month. And you guys will be able to get solid content from you, boy, on a month-to-month basis. I believe we're close to that 400 mark once again, 400 subscribed members. I don't think any of them have much to complain about. So glad we're able to stick around that number, but 500 is what I have in my crosshairs, and I know I got to get a bit of a winning streak going on here to be able to achieve that number, and I'm planning to do exactly that, especially with ending off the year on a high note. So make sure you guys check out the Patreon. Link is in the description below. And lastly, shout out to Coolbet. Coolbet.com. Use promo code MMALOTN2. That's the number 2. They'll match your initial deposit up to $200. And great website. You're able to parlay props, parlay whatever the fuck you want. Solid lines as well. Sometimes they're a little bit slow on moving their lines as well, so you'll be able to get a good be able to get good lines and odds on some of the bets that you might be eyeing compared to the other spots that you're going to be placing bets on. So make sure you guys check out Coolbet because they support your boy. I support them as well. Again, use promo code MMALOTN2 and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. All right. Your boy just turned 30 a couple of days ago, ready to fucking make some money at this prime ripe age of $30. And that's all going to start with UFC 267 this weekend. I hope you guys enjoy the breakdowns, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Alan Nascimento. We got minus 350 on the Dagestani fighter Tagir Ulanbekov and plus 290 on the Brazilian Alan Nascimento, who's going to be making his UFC debut after falling short on the Contender Series a couple years ago against Ralian Paiva via decision. I believe he ended up picking up one more win on the regional scene before the UFC ended up picking him up regardless, because after that performance against Paiva, the guy definitely showed that he was UFC ready. He probably should have been the first ever fighter on the Contender Series to have been signed even after a loss in that fight. So luckily for him, he still finds his way inside the UFC. Now, he's fought some pretty stiff competition on the regional scene. Will Campuzano, Ricardo Ramos, two names that really stood out to me that he competed against, but he also competed all over the world, most notably Rizin as well. So he has a plethora of experience that he's going to be bringing to the table here. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against a very tough Dagestani fighter in Tagir Ulanbekov, who is looking to brush off the mediocre performance in his UFC debut and truly assert himself in this 125-pound division with a dominant victory here over Alan Nascimento. Now, I had Tagir in a parlay in his last fight, and he really made me sweat for it. But I think at the time we were really undervaluing what Bruno Silva brought to the table, and Bruno Silva has truly, since that fight, really flourished into a solid fighter, and it really makes that Ulanbekov fight seem a little bit more understandable as to why the fight was, closer than the minus 400 had indicated pre-fight. But in this fight against Nascimento is mainly a jiu-jitsu guy. He has some decent striking, don't get me wrong, but it seems like he gets his best best work done when he's able to ground his opponents and kind of control them for their working for a TKO or a submission. However, I think he's going to have his work cut out for him against Ulanbekov, who scrambles very well, is more than likely the better wrestler, and will more than likely be able to accrue a ton of control time from the top position, which is his main path to victory in the majority of his fights. Ulanbekov is used to being the taller guy and lankier guy at 125 pounds, standing at 5'7", but this is going to be his third time he's actually gone up against somebody who's taller than him, but it doesn't seem to, really matter for him because he's always able to get these guys to the ground and go to work from there. When he does have a size advantage, he does try to use his distance and his striking to really put it on his opponents and then hide his takedowns after that. But I think that, these guys are pretty much similar in their striking styles. I don't think either guy will have a significant advantage in the striking realm, but I think that the advantage for Ulanbekov will truly show on the ground. Now, Nascimento, could be decent off his back, maybe pull off a reversal or two, but I'd be surprised if he does it with much consistency or much substance either. I think Ulanbekov has shown, even in the Bruno Silva fight, that when he finds himself in bad positions, he does a good job in terms of reversing and getting out of those positions, and I'm expecting him to do the same thing here against Nascimento should he find himself in a compromising position. I do lean Ulanbekov, but it's a little bit difficult to, pull that trigger at minus 350 on him until we see him truly get comfortable inside the octagon and give those performances that he was giving when he was fighting on the regional scene. Last thing I'll say about Ulanbekov before I wrap this breakdown up, he might have one loss on his record, but if you guys go back and watch his fight where he lost, it was against, UFC fighter Zaleski Ismagulov. You see that was a robbery. More than likely, it was a robbery. You saw that fight actually took place in the hometown and home country of Zaleski, so there was more than likely some hometown cooking there. But I truly believe that Ulanbekov deserved that decision, and he probably should be undefeated to this point. But I'm expecting him to go back to his classic self this weekend against Nascimento, land some takedowns, accrue some top time, get some ground and pound going. Not 100% sure if he'll be able to get him out of there because, Nascimento's actually never been finished in any of his losses. So I'm going to say that Ulanbekov more than likely wins his fight via decision, and his decision prop is sitting at plus 110 is not too bad of a look. So I'll definitely be really looking very closely at that line this week, and will more than likely take a little bit of a shot on it, as I think there's a couple decision props on this entire card that we should pay attention to. This is one of many that I'll more than likely be tackling as a potential official lock of the, or not lock of the night play, but official bet for this coming weekend. So official prediction, Tagir Ulanbekov via decision. Damir Ismagulov going up against Magomed Mustafaev. We got minus 260 on Ismagulov and plus 220 the return on Mustafaev. Now, this is a very intriguing fight, somewhat similar to Ismagulov's last fight, actually, where he fought another explosive striker who was able to have some success, but you got to give some credit to the fact, you got to give some credit to the fact that Ismagulov was coming off a pretty extended layoff before going into that fight. And again, when you're fighting an explosive fighter like Rafael Alves, you need to be careful of that power that he brings to the table. And Damir, slept on it for a couple seconds and paid for it dearly. But luckily for him, he was able to quickly reverse positions in that fight, in that first round, and then really control the rest of that first round by landing some good shots from the top position on the ground. In this fight against Mustafaev, he's fighting another guy that's very explosive and can find that chin really quickly. But outside of that, I'm not sure what else Mustafaev brings to the table. Not super keen on chasing takedowns and getting his fighter to the ground and controlling from on top, which is, where he's found success in the past. But more often than not, it seems like he's looking to go out there and look to take your head off pretty much. And it's going to be a very difficult task to do that against a guy like Damir, who's very sound and disciplined on the feet. Again, I want to chalk it up to his layoff the last time around, which is why he got rocked by Alves in that first round. And even in the third round, it seemed like he was starting to slow down and Alves was starting to pick up, which is not something anybody was going to predict, considering that Alves more often than not showed that he slows down in his fights, but it was the complete opposite that night. Here against with Magomed, he could have early success like Alves did, but the longer that this fight goes on, I think we'll see the better cardio from Ismagulov, the better discipline from him as well, and then just using that sniper-like approach that he uses, staying on the outside, using his lead hook to really scare off his opponents in terms of trying to close the distance and get their own strikes off. And then obviously using his, distance striking to keep Magomed Mustafaev on the outside and just getting his shots off in that aspect. I like Ismagulov. I truly think he's probably one of the dark horses in this division. And now that he's finally starting to up his activity, I think that we'll see him start to, capture that top 15 and top 10 and hopefully top 5 stature that I truly believe he deserves. He only has one loss on his record. The guy is very good, in my opinion, one of the best strikers out there, and I think he'll be able to show that in this fight against Mustafaev. I truly believe Mustafaev has a KO or bust situation in this fight. Outside of that, I just don't see how he wins minutes. I think Ismagulov does a good job in terms of, again, winning minutes on the feet, landing takedowns and doing some good work from on top if he needs to. But I think in this fight, he can just stick on the outside, stay away from danger, and just pick apart Mustafaev en route to a decision. His decision prop sits around plus 100, which I think is absolutely accurate, as more than likely his win condition is a decision. So I do favor Ismagulov in this. If you are looking to back Mustafaev, his KO prop sits around plus 525. I think that's the best way to attack it. But the line is starting to come in on that fight. I think people are watching that Alves fight and thinking that Mustafaev will be able to replicate that. He could. But again, I truly think that there was some ring rust that had to go into that performance for Ismagulov, which is why he, didn't have as picture perfect of a performance as we're used to seeing from him. So, I like Ismagulov here. I like him by decision as well at plus 100. Another Russian that I am targeting to win by decision, back-to-back Russians here. I apologize. Ismagulov is actually a Kazakhstani fighter, but he does a fight out of Russia, so I'm going to call him a Russian anyway. But yeah, another spot where I think that the decision prop is absolutely live here at plus 100. Got to take a bit of a shot because I think that he is the way better minute winner, and I think he'll be able to stay away from the big power, won't get knocked out, and continue to put the pressure and the output on Mustafaev here. So I'm going Damir Ismagulov via decision. Andre Petroski versus Hu Yaozong. We got minus 230 on Petroski and plus 190 on the returning Yaozong. Now, the whole storyline behind Hu Yaozong over the last couple months has been the fact that he's going up against Alan Amadovsky. I believe they were scheduled to fight a couple months ago. One of them had to pull out due to COVID-related issues, if I'm not mistaken. Then they were rescheduled for this card. Unfortunately, Amadovsky had to pull out, and in steps Petroski now, who is a much more difficult opponent for Yaozong to go up against. Now, Yaozong's been out of the cage for over 3 years, and he did have to deal with the USADA suspension during that amount of time, but it seems like he's completely reinvented himself over there at the Shanghai UFC Performance Institute, and he looks like a completely different fighter now. Obviously, he used to compete at light heavyweight, even competed at heavyweight at a certain point, but now he's down to 185 pounds, probably where he should have been this entire time. But he has a very tough task ahead of him, and Andre Petroski, who will likely try to look to take him to the ground here and get that jiu-jitsu going and probably rack up another first-round submission victory on his record, which is what I'm thinking is going to happen here. It seems like the majority of Yaozong's training over the last 3 years has been around that wrestling game, so I think it might be a little bit more difficult for Petroski to get this fight to the ground, but I think he eventually will, and then I think once they hit the ground, they're going to be levels apart, especially in the jiu-jitsu game. If this fight does get out of the first round, things could get sticky once again for Petroski, and even though, he ended up finishing Michael Gilmore in the third round of his last fight, I think Hu will provide a little bit more resistance and make it a little bit more difficult of a time for Petroski to get anything done after that second round. Not saying it's not possible that Petroski grounds him once again and then eventually grinds him out or gets that submission, but I'd be clenching my butt cheeks a little bit more if I'm paying the chalk here on Petroski. Now, I do favor him to win this fight, but I favor his props more than anything. Petroski via sub plus 250, not too bad. Petroski in round 1 plus 270, not that bad. And then Petroski inside the distance, which is, always a good spot, not to get too greedy, plus 100-ish. I don't mind that either. So for me, if you're looking to back Petroski, don't even bother with the chalk here. Sure, go ahead, chuck him into a couple parlays if you want, but I think the majority of his win condition is front-loaded in this fight, where he has to go out there and try to submit this guy early, get him down, and just grind him out, or get that TKO submission, whatever the hell it might be. But he's going to have to get this fight to the ground. Again, I don't think Yaozong is this crazy striker, so I don't think that Petroski's going to be in crazy trouble if this fight remains on the feet. However, I do see him gassing himself out a little bit more, especially being in a more of a stressful scenario in a fight when he's striking compared to when he's more comfortable being on the ground and trying to submit guys. So I like Petroski here. I think he gets it done relatively quickly. I think this is a great spot for him to take on short notice, to not really deal with too much resistance. And I think he's going to ground this fight and find the submission quickly thereafter. So plus 270 on round one. Don't mind that stab at all. And I'll probably be taking that myself. But my official prediction is going to be round one submission for Andre Petroski. Lerone Murphy versus Makwan Amirkhani. We got minus 290 on Murphy and plus 245 the return on Makwan Amirkhani. Now, this seems like a pretty binary fight to break down for you guys. Amirkhani more than likely needs to drag this fight to the ground to have success, whereas Lerone Murphy will likely want to keep this fight on the feet so that he can get his striking going and possibly find that chin or body of Amirkhani and put him out in this fight. The one bet that actually kind of speaks to me in this fight is the under 2.5. You know what I mean? I think that Makwan, although he's shown some decent durability late in fights and has been able to make it to the final bell against past opponents, he's been kind of bailed out with the fact that he's been able to complete takedowns late and just stay out of crazy trouble. But here against Lerone Murphy, I think he's going to deal with a little bit more resistance in that third round in terms of, giving up takedowns or something like that. And I think that we'll see Lerone Murphy, keep this fight on the feet and then really start to get his striking going after that. One thing I really liked about Lerone Murphy's game the last time around against Douglas Silva de Andrade was the fact that he was just ripping those leg kicks and really damaging that lead wheel of Douglas Silva. And I think we'll see the same thing here against Makwan, especially to take the pop off the shots of the takedowns that are going to be coming from the Amirkhani side. It's no-brainer. He's going to be shooting in this fight. But I think that if Murphy is able to keep this fight on the feet, he's going to absolutely punish him there. The under 2.5, I really like in the spot at plus 100. I think there is more than a 50% chance that this fight actually ends inside the distance. Makwan is a wizard on the ground, and if he is successful in getting Lerone Murphy down early here, he can lock up a sub, at a pretty decent clip. And then with Lerone Murphy, if he's able to keep the fight vertical, I think his power is going to be a little bit too much for Amirkhani to handle, and I think he'll eventually be able to get him out of there. The interesting props for me here, Murphy by KO at plus 150, Murphy in round 3 at plus 850. We know that Makwan has a pretty horrible gas tank at times, so that's where we'll see Murphy truly shine, I believe, in the later parts of this fight. But the Makwan Amirkhani submission prop at plus 850, I think that's a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? I think that he is a wizard with his Darce chokes and Anaconda chokes, and I think he could absolutely catch Lerone Murphy in something like that as well. But at plus 850, I think that line is absolutely off here. So my official prediction is going to be Murphy third round TKO, but that under 2.5 speaks to me. The fight doesn't go to decision, which will probably be about minus 120, minus 125. I think that has a little bit of value as well. Again, Murphy minus 290, minus 300, a little bit too crazy for my liking because Makwan is definitely way more alive than the odds are indicating. However, I just can't pull the trigger on him. What I will likely sprinkle, though, is the submission prop. Like I said, plus 850 is crazy. So final prediction for this fight, though, I do think that Murphy survives the early onslaught on the ground, keeps the fight vertical for the second and third round, but eventually finds that finish in the third round against Amirkhani. That is what is slightly giving me the hesitation in terms of taking the under 2.5 because it might go past that under 2.5 mark, but still end up finishing as well because I think that Lerone Murphy is very live to get a finish the later that this fight goes. So official prediction, Lerone Murphy to win this fight via third round KO. Michal Oleksiejczuk versus Shamil Gamzatov. We got minus 140 on Gamzatov and plus 120 on Oleksiejczuk. Now, this is an intriguing fight because you have a pretty clean, crisp striker on the Gamzatov side. A little bit of a far cry from what we've been seeing from the other Russians in terms of landing takedowns and just grapple fucking their opponents. Gamzatov seems to get most of his work done on the feet, but I think that's going to be a tough task here against a guy like Michal Oleksiejczuk, who's just going to be moving forward the entire time. Pressing him, pushing him, pressuring him, whatever the hell it is. I feel like I just said the two same things just now, but it is what it is. That's what his style is. It's move forward, try to put the pressure on his opponents, try to get them out of there. And even if he doesn't get the knockout, he does a good job of kind of pushing them back and really optically favoring what the judges are going to be seeing. So, shout out to anybody that got in on Oleksiejczuk around that plus 150 line, because I thought that's a great line for him considering the fight that we're going to be getting here. But as the line starts to close, you got to take into consideration the clean, crisp striking of the Gamzatov side. He just can't wait, right? Like, he will more than likely be on his back foot for the most part of this fight, but it's about the activity that he does off of his back foot that will likely make him, or that should allow him to get a decision in this fight. I'd be surprised if there's a finish on either side. I kind of favor, the Oleksiejczuk side to get a finish if there's a finish at all. If I'm not mistaken, I saw the KO prop roughly around plus 600, plus 700, which I think isn't too bad, especially considering the way that he fights. But I do think that he just continuously pressures Gamzatov for the majority of these 15 minutes and ends up winning a decision in this fight. Again, Oleksiejczuk could get a little bit sloppy at times. He is a very boxing-centric fighter, and he could leave himself open for takedowns as well if Gamzatov decides to go that route. But historically speaking, he doesn't really approach fights that way. He prefers to let his hands go, but again, we've seen Oleksiejczuk kind of look like a fish out of water off of his back at times, and if Gamzatov is smart enough, he could possibly go for takedowns. But based on the tape, I just can't go out there and say that I'm willing to pay minus 140 on a fighter who doesn't historically fight with a grapple-heavy game plan, and that's probably what he needs here to beat a guy like Oleksiejczuk and deal with that kind of pressure that's going to be coming his way. So I do like the Oleksiejczuk side here. I'll likely be passing on this fight, but plus 285 for Oleksiejczuk by decision, that's a prop that definitely tickles my fancy in this spot. Like I said, optically speaking, I think he's going to pretty much give the judges everything they need to give him each round here. It just depends on how cleanly Gamzatov's going to be countering, whether he drops him or even whether he goes for takedowns. Again, the latter argument there, I just don't see happening. So it's going to have to come down to who's going to be the cleaner, crisper striker, maybe landing knockdowns, whatever it might be. But I got to favor the guy that's going to be coming forward pretty much the entire time. And in my opinion, that's going to be Michal Oleksiejczuk. So my official prediction for the fight is going to be Michal Oleksiejczuk via decision. Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos going up against Benoit Saint-Denis. We got minus 230 on dos Santos and plus 190 the return on the newcomer Saint-Denis, who brings in an unblemished 8-0 record to the UFC, and he's competed a couple of times over there in Brave CF, which isn't too bad of a regional scene, and finally he's earned himself a contract to come to the UFC, and I think this is a solid matchup for him to go up against Zaleski dos Santos, where we should be able to see what kind of fighter Benoit totally is. Now, Benoit has never been to a decision. The guy normally goes out there, takes his opponents down, and tries to look for a submission. And he is highly a submission over position kind of guy, because if he's not able to successfully sink in a choke or an armbar or whatever it may be, he's given up positions, and that's not what you want to be doing at the highest level here. Now, it's obviously worked out for him 8 times in a row against mediocre level competition, but now that he's taken a pretty steep climb in competition here, I think he's going to be in trouble, especially if he, looks to go for the submissions a little bit too much. And Zaleski, not too shabby on the ground either, right? Like the last time he's been submitted, he actually been submitted twice in his MMA career, but it was over 8 years ago. So he's definitely shorted up. He's more than just a capoeira fighter now. He likes to go for takedowns to kind of secure rounds, just like he did against Alexei Kunchenko. And I thought he kind of got screwed out of a decision in his last fight against Muslim Salikov. And if you guys go over there and look at MMA decisions, you guys will see that there's a ton of people that agree with that statement as well. I don't know how any judges could give Muslim Salikov that first round, especially considering that it was just it was a 50-50 fight until Zaleski was able to drop him and follow up with some ground and pound. You got to give that first round to him. I thought he won the second round as well, a little bit closer, but I still think he won that round. And then the third round you probably give to Salikov. But I thought Zaleski, deserves to be coming off a win at this point, but is what it is. Here he is welcoming a UFC newcomer, and this feels like a spot where if he is able to survive the early onslaught, which is inevitable here, I think that Benoit will be able to secure takedowns early in this fight. But if he's not able to get a submission, I think Zaleski will be able to do work on the feet. He's going to have to be a little bit more disciplined than his regular capoeira self, considering that, anytime he tries to spin or anything like that, that's going to be an opportunity for Benoit, goddamn, it's Benoit. I'm so used to saying Ryan Benoit. I'm not used to saying Benoit for a UFC fighter. But here we are, Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit Saint-Denis is going to be waiting for those opportunities for Zaleski to spin or do whatever the fuck he's doing so that he can close the distance and try to drag this fight to the ground. again, if he's not successful in doing so, he doesn't look the most comfortable on the feet. And I think that's where Zaleski could truly have some success. Now, I think there's going to be some desperation takedowns at times for Saint-Denis. And if there is, we know that Zaleski is going to be looking for a knee or something sneaky, an uppercut, whatever it might be, to be able to catch Benoit on the way in. And then I think he'll be able to knock him out. So there aren't many props available at the time of me recording this breakdown, but I'm interested to see what Zaleski via KO looks like, and even the under. If it's set at 2.5, I'll be intrigued by the under 2.5. But given the track record of Saint-Denis, they might set it at 1.5. So the odds makers might be sneaky there for sure. So keep an eye on the under 2.5. If it's, anything better than plus 150 or something like that, I'd probably pull the trigger, especially considering the type of fighting style that Benoit brings to the table here, which is move forward, pressure, and then that leaves openings for both guys to potentially get finishes. I do lean the veteran, though. I do think that Zaleski will be able to keep the fight standing, or at least get it to the point where it's standing, and then find that knockout shortly thereafter. So I'm going Zaleski, let's call it second round KO. Albert Duraev versus Roman Kopylov. We got minus 320 on Duraev and plus 260 the return on Roman Kopylov. Let's start off on the Kopylov side of things, who's coming off a roughly 2-year layoff now. Hasn't been able to get inside the cage, whether it's his opponent pulling out or him having visa issues, but here he is finally making his return. But in his UFC debut, he did fall, or at least lose, his first ever professional MMA fight when he ended up getting choked out by Carl Roberson in the third round of their fight. Now, studying the regional tape of Kopylov, he looks good, right? Good distance striking, ability to kind of just pick apart opponents and really, smash them, especially with his knees and his kicks. But the majority of the opponents that he was going up against, with the exception of the last 2 or 3 opponents, seemed a little bit, to be a little bit of a pushover. And, you got to give Kopylov a little bit of credit considering that he is super young and, it was just earlier on in his career. But I think people take too much stock into that, especially considering like some of the guys didn't even seem like they wanted to be in there with him. But when he did start to face some opposition, the title-winning effort that he had, I thought that was a great performance for him against a legitimate competitor. But I just don't think that guy that he was facing, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, that he was a legitimate threat to Kopylov. That's what I believe Duraev will be. And then in his next fight against Inomoto, I think the guy's name was, anytime Inomoto was like, pressuring him or putting out volume, it seemed like Kopylov was stuck staring the entire time, right? Like he was just waiting for his opportunity to finally get set and get his strikes off. Luckily for him, Inomoto seems to slow down in that fight, and then Kopylov was able to pick it up and then truly get him out of there. So good regional tape on Kopylov, but what you saw once he starts taking a step up in competition and starts facing guys that aren't scared of his striking, he starts to fall into some trouble. He starts to get low volume, starts backpedaling. His cardio doesn't look the greatest either, and then he really starts giving up bad positions, especially in the grappling, clinching, and jiu-jitsu positions. Duraev, what is there not to like about the guy, right? It's crazy to me that he has 3 losses on his record, the most recent one being in 2014 where he got ground and pounded by Anatoly Tokov, who is a very solid Bellator fighter at this point in time, but was able to accrue a very solid record himself. But that was a 25-year-old Duraev who was, I think, 5-2 at the time, quite young in his career. But since then, he's just been on an absolute rocket ship. Great takedowns, solid striking, like good enough striking. I'd say Kopylov is the better striker, but I think that Duraev is good enough in the striking realm that he should be able to put the pressure on Kopylov, drag this fight to the ground, and then have absolute success and probably find a finish quickly thereafter. Like, if you're getting submitted by Carl Roberson, it's really not a good look. But I just can't wiki cap this fight, right? I did the tape. I feel as though, even though Kopylov defended some really good takedowns on the regional scene, he's going to be dealing with the best fighter, actually, he's probably fought in his entire career with Albert Duraev. Duraev, former two-weight champion over there in ACA or ACB, whatever you want to call it now. And that just goes to show, the level of competition that he was fighting on the regional scene there was just next level, much better than what you're going to see fighters in the LFA or, Cage Warriors or anything. I think ACA and ACB is probably the toughest regional scene to go through. Even Fight Nights Global, one of the tougher regional scenes to go through, and then make it to the UFC. Those guys are probably most UFC ready. And even though Roman Kopylov came over from the Fight Nights Global promotion, I think he had some very favorable matchups for him there. But here, now he's finally fighting guys that are going to push him and making him uncomfortable and try to take him down. And and effectively take him down, and then obviously do work on the ground. I'm expecting this exactly that from Duraev here. I'm not too worried about him potentially having chin issues, as he has been knocked out in the past. But it's been long enough now. He's eaten enough shots from what I've seen, and he's been able to come forward, use his leg kicks very well, which is something that Carl Roberson had a ton of success with as well. I think there's a difference in terms of stance as well, and by comparing those two matches, but at least the leg kick is live and there for Duraev, as we've seen in past fights. But then ultimately dragging the fight to the ground and just not giving his opponents anything on the ground. I just don't see what Kopylov will be able to present here outside of a Hail Mary KO. So yeah, I think Duraev is worth the juice. There's a reason I already locked him up in as part of my lock of the night play. And I think he absolutely cruises in this fight, and I think he probably gets Kopylov out of there under 1.5. So I like Duraev. Go ahead and parlay him if you want, but even taking him inside the distance, I don't think is too bad of a slot. It currently sits at -120, so close to evenish money. I like it, man. I think this is going to be a one-sided beatdown. I'm all on the Albert Duraev train. So once again, I'm going to go with Duraev, and I'll say first round TKO, ground and pound. Zubaira Tukhugov versus Ricardo Ramos. We got -165 for Tukhugov and +145 the return on Ricardo Ramos. Now, before I taped this fight, I really thought I'd end up coming out on the other side with the bet on Ricardo Ramos, as I believe he's just been underrated, which is crazy because I believe he was a little bit overrated when he came into the UFC. There was a lot of hype on the kid, but now that his UFC career is starting to pan out, people are starting to underrate him, in my opinion, just as we saw in the Bill Algeo fight in terms of the odds that we were getting there. And he was able to right the wrongs there and able to get the decision victory. Excuse me. Decision victory where he was able to land, I believe it was 6 or 8 takedowns in that fight, which is absolutely crazy. However, I think on the feet, he leaves himself a little bit too open at times to be hit, and Tukhugov does a really good job in terms of kind of just waning forward, throwing big shots, and really putting the pressure on his opponents, and when he needs to, he goes out there and lands takedowns at will. I don't think he can stand at, distance here with Ramos, because Ramos will have tremendous success, in my opinion, from the outside, landing good shots, kicks, whatever it might be. So I think that we'll see Tukhugov kind of pushing forward for the majority of this fight, maybe not being as disciplined as he was in the first round against Duadu, which was a damn close round and a close fight altogether. But I do think that we'll have to see him push the pressure here to have success. And he does have some big power in his hands, right? He was able to finish Kevin Aguilar, which is, would seem to be very difficult before that. So we do know that he has power in his hands. And I do know that, I think most of us know that Ricardo Ramos probably has some durability issues that he needs working on as well. So Tukhugov could absolutely find that chin himself. Not to mention, there's the takedown advantage for Tukhugov. However, he really needs to be disciplined on the ground, as Ramos is pretty crafty on the ground himself. But I've seen Tukhugov, get out of bad positions in the past and hold top control for extended periods of time, and he should be able to do that against Ramos here. My concern with backing Tukhugov, though, is that third round. The guy always seems to slow down in that third round, and that's where his opponents normally have success. I put out a stat earlier on Twitter today saying that he's been to a decision 5 times in his UFC career, 4 of those being split decisions, and he's gone 1-2-1 in those 4 split decisions. But in those 5 decision fights, he's lost the third round on at least one judge's scorecard in every single fight. So that does lead you to believe that he just fights a little bit too close the later that fights go. Not to mention, does he fight close, but he also puts himself into like desperation takedown scenarios, which, you really want to be careful, especially when you have a high level black belt like Ricardo Ramos, who will be looking to grab that neck if you extend it a little bit too far, or look to get your back, especially if you're going to be a little bit too desperate with the takedown attempts. And we've definitely seen fighters in the past, when they are too desperate to get a takedown, they give up their backs, and Tukhugov is no different there either. So there's a couple ways I would look to play this fight if you play it at all. Personally, I'm going to be passing, but there are a couple sprinkles that I like from a props perspective. The pick is Tukhugov. The pick is Tukhugov by decision. +150 is just not enough for me to get riled up to actually bet it with any official money or any big money. But Tukhugov round 1 at +800, he could absolutely find the chin of Ricardo Ramos early here and put him away. So I think that's a little bit out of whack. And then Ricardo Ramos round 3 at +2000. Again, like I said, if Tukhugov gets a little bit too overzealous and too desperate with takedowns, he's going to leave himself to open to get choked out or get his back taken, get TKO'd, whatever it could be. And I think Ramos Ramos is live and doing so. So plus 2,000, I think that line is just a little bit too crazy. So another aspect of this fight that I'll probably throw out there for you guys from the live betting perspective, if this fight is 1-1 going into round 3, I'd look to bet Ramos if you can get him at like minus 120 or better. But I do think he will be more than likely to win that third round in this fight. But as an overall prediction, I got to go to Tukhugov, and I think he'll do enough in those first 2 rounds, stay out of danger in that third round, and take home a decision victory. So official prediction here is going to be Zubaira Tukhugov via decision. Amanda Ribas versus Verna Jandiroba. We got minus 165 on Ribas and plus 145 on Verna Jandiroba. Now, let's start off on the Amanda Ribas side of things, who's obviously coming off a loss to Marina Rodriguez back in January, where she got starched after she played around a little bit too long on the feet in that second round after having tremendous success with the takedown in that first round. Now, that just further proves the suspicions that I had going into that fight, hence why I ended up betting Marina Rodriguez in that fight, is the fact that I think that Ribas' striking is more show than substance. And what I mean by that is, like, when you look at her fights, like the Mackenzie Dern fight or the Paige Van Zandt fight or the Randa Marcos fight, she looks like she's really good on the feet, right? Like she's fighting in the proper stance, she's throwing good strikes and all that type of stuff. But I think once she actually deals with legitimate resistance in the striking realm, she finds herself in trouble. And that's what we saw in the Poliana Vienna fight, where they just went balls to the wall and she ended up getting knocked out in that fight. And then Marina Rodriguez, who's probably the best striker that she had faced up until that point, and it didn't go so well for her in that fight. I'm not saying that Verna Jandiroba is this crazy knockout artist or this crazy stand-up fighter, but I think that she'll kind of get through that. I think once she gets a little bit comfortable in that fight, she'll be able to move forward, throw some big strikes, close that distance, and try to go for takedowns. And I think that from there, she'll be able to do some good work from on top, control Ribas. I'd be surprised if she's able to submit Ribas. I think that Ribas is a legitimate jiu-jitsu player herself, but I think that Verna is definitely better on the ground. Now, I'm going to obviously hear the case for, Verna lost to Mackenzie Dern. How could you back her against Amanda Ribas here? We all know MMA math obviously doesn't work out, but the thing that I found intriguing about that fight was that we only saw Verna Jandiroba go for one takedown in that fight, which she completed and had some good top time in that second round. But then there was a couple instances where she could go into the guard of Mackenzie Dern, but she refused to. She allowed her back to her feet. In my opinion, I think she knew that Mackenzie Dern was probably better on the ground than her, and she really didn't want to get mixed up there and was confident enough in her striking that she'd be able to put the work on Dern, but it just didn't work out for her in that fight. The one thing about Jandiroba's fights that you'll see if you dig deep enough in her tape, she chases takedowns a lot, right? Like she wants to go for takedowns. She wants to grind you out. She wants to try to find a submission. That's how she normally fights. More often than not, you'll see her shoot for more than one takedown. But in the UFC's case or her UFC career so far, there's been instances where she hasn't shot more than one takedown, right? The Kanako Murata fight. Murata was obviously the better wrestler there, and it was just a matter of time before Murata decided to get the fight to the ground, and that's where we saw Jandiroba obviously get that submission attempt that was close to breaking the arm of Murata, and that fight obviously ending, so she didn't need to shoot a takedown there. The next fight, the Mackenzie Dern fight, like I said, I think that she thought Dern was going to be better than her on the ground, which is why she didn't shoot for more than one takedown. And then the Felice Herrig fight, she only needed one takedown to submit Felice Herrig in that fight. But if you look at all the other fights, she's shooting 2, 3, 4 takedowns. I think she shot for 6 takedowns against Carla Esparza. So like there's fights where she does more often than not seek the takedown. I think that we're going to see that this weekend against Amanda Ribas. If she just decides to play on the feet though and let Amanda Ribas kind of do her thing from distance, things can get a little iffy at that point. But I think that we'll see Verna go back to her ways, her classic ways of trying to drag the fight to the ground. And again, stats matter to a certain extent, but for certain fighters, you got to take it with a grain of salt. And what I mean by that with Amanda Ribas, it looks like it says that she has 85% takedown defense, but the majority of that was just from the Mackenzie Dern fight, where Mackenzie Dern went 0 of 6 on takedowns in that fight. Heck, Randa Marcos landed the first takedown that she threw at Amanda Ribas, and obviously she didn't want to tie up on the ground with Ribas, and we saw that fight quickly get stood up right after that. But again, it goes to show that you can get Amanda Ribas down, and I think that Verna Jandiroba will be successful in doing that, and I think from there she'll be able to control her from that top position. I'm not 100% sold that she'll be able to submit her, which is why I like Jandiroba by decision in this spot. But yeah, I like the Jandiroba side here, plus 145, and it looks like the money is coming in on Amanda Ribas. Excuse me. So I'm just going to wait it out. It's only Wednesday of fight week. I think there'll be more money coming in on Ribas, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it gets pushed back up to minus 200. That's when I'll go in on Jandiroba in this spot. So I like Jandiroba quite a bit here. I do think that she'll be able to land takedowns and control this fight on the feet, on the ground. And I think she'll be able to land her strikes on the feet to close the distance the way that she needs to get the fight to the ground. So don't look too hard at the Carla Esparza loss, which again isn't a bad loss. Carla Esparza is absolutely killing it right now. And then the Mackenzie Dern fight, again, bad stylistic matchup for her, or at least bad game plan that she had going into that fight, not trusting her jiu-jitsu enough, at least in my opinion, from the outside looking in. But I think she knows she's going to have an advantage here over Ribas, and she'll be able to take this fight to the ground and do some good work. So official prediction is going to be Jandiroba via decision. Magomed Ankalaev versus Volkan Oezdemir. We got minus 300 on the Russian and plus 250 on Volkan Oezdemir. Now, I always see this crusade out there for people wanting to fade Ankalaev due to his low output style, but I really think that he's a very patient and disciplined fighter, which is why he always ends up finding success in his fights, because he just waits for that moment for his opponent to slip up and then he follows up. Or he, just like his Nikita Krylov fight, he adjusts and he goes out there and knows that Krylov will probably throw enough volume out there that could potentially make this fight difficult. So he decides to drag the fight to the ground and accrue a ton of control time to be able to get the victory in that fight. I think he's the best 205er on the planet, to be honest. Again, I'm trying to keep my bias out of this, which is why I'm not betting this fight to begin with. But he should go out there and do work against Volkan, right? A very good striker. I think Volkan could potentially be a little bit chinny too. Not just saying that because Yuri Prohaska put him out, but there have been iffy moments for him in the past. And I think, Magomed, he could pretty much win this fight wherever he wants. The only way, in my opinion, that Volkan wins this fight is if it's, he truly does enough volume on the feet that could cause Magomed some issues here. But I just think that we'll see Ankalaev land the better strikes. Again, his strikes landed per minute, I think, are like 3.5 or something, 3 to 3.5. And then his strikes absorbed is only about 1.5 strikes absorbed. Like that's a huge level of defense, right? I think he has 64 or 65% striking defense as well. Like he barely ever gets hit. Nobody really touches him. So it's just going to have to be the activity of Volkan. Even if he's not touching Magomed, he'll probably give him some troubles. But it is tough to back Ankalaev at minus 300 against a guy that has a viable path to victory in Volkan Oezdemir. But I still don't have the cojones to go out there and fade a guy like Ankalaev, even at plus 250 for Volkan in this spot. Again, I think that Magomed could win this fight pretty much where he wants. Striking, I think he could knock out Volkan if he wants. He could drag this fight to the ground. I truly believe that's a viable spot as well. And we've seen Volkan in the past have issues on the ground, right? Like he's been submitted in the past, I think twice at least at this point. But I think that's where we'll see Ankalaev have a significant advantage in this fight, is being able to control him from the top position, and maybe even, I know he doesn't have any submissions on his record, but that is something that has been a bit of a kryptonite to Volkan Oezdemir in the past, is submissions. I know it's sitting roughly around plus 2,500 for Magomed Ankalaev to win this fight via submission. Might have to take a little bit of a sprinkle on it, especially if I believe he's going to take a grapple heavy approach, which I think would be the best thing for him to do in this fight. Again, Volkan at times might get a little bit too caught up in his activity and might just get countered very well and probably put on his butt there. But I could see this being a drawn-out fight, maybe some clinch fucking, grapple fucking, whatever it may be, but I could see this fight going over 2.5 rounds, which is kind of what I'm feeling the most in terms of money line and totals in this fight. The over 2.5 is sitting around plus 105. I don't mind that, but even Ankalaev at plus 190 via decision, I don't think is too bad of a stab here either. So, all in all, I'll probably stay away from this fight. I will give credit to Oezdemir, as I do think he has some viable ways to win this fight. Most importantly, his volume and output, and possibly his leg kicks, right? He really did a number on Alexander Rakic's legs, if you guys remember that fight. But I think that Ankalaev is just too good to get caught up in one of those fights. I think he will, counter well, and then I think he'll be able to drag the fight to the ground when he needs to win some minutes and get some control time as well. So my pick is going to be Magomed Ankalaev, and I'll take him to win this fight via decision. It's finally here, the return of Khamzat Chimaev going up against Li Jingliang. And in terms of odds, we're currently looking at minus 550 for the Wolf and plus 425 for Li Jingliang. Now, I have too many concerns about this fight, especially on the Khamzat Chimaev side. We all know the story about how bad his COVID infection was, even to the point that he pretty much retired. Very, not for a long time, but he retired because of the effects that it was taking on his body. Apparently, it really fucked up his lungs, and apparently he's gotten a good enough work that he's been able to get back into the gym and get back into the cage. But I still have concerns, and paying minus 550 on him at this spot, which seems like this seems like a pretty easy fight for him against Li Jingliang. I need to see him go out there and actually prove that he's a legitimate, he's back into a legitimate shape before I can pay that minus 550 on him once again. Just watching the Neil Magny fight against Li Jingliang, you can pretty much tell that Chimaev shouldn't have too much issues in terms of dragging this fight to the ground. But if he's not able to get Jingliang out of there within the first round, then things can get shaky in that second and third round, especially if he does still have lingering effects of that COVID battle that he had to deal with earlier this year. So with Li, he's durable. I think he's never been KO'd. He's been submitted by Keita Nakamura, several years ago, and has shown decent improvement on a fight-to-fight basis. But here with Chimaev, I think he's going to struggle with the size of him, and I think he'll obviously struggle with the takedowns. But just too many question marks for me regarding Chimaev. I hope he comes back at full health and full potential so he can make that run like he was hoping to, before his whole COVID situation. But I think if you're betting Chimaev, you might as well take the under 1.5 because that's more than likely the way that he wins. Like, are we 100% certain that if the fight doesn't get finished in the first round that he'll be able to grind it out over 15 minutes? I don't know how you can have that type of confidence given everything that he's gone through. So the under 1.5 minus 110. I think if you're backing Chimaev, that's probably the best way to go because you'll likely get it done early given his aggressiveness and the crushing top pressure that he usually brings to his opponents. And the majority of his fights have finished under that 1.5 round mark. Chimaev inside the distance minus 165. Again, much better than paying the minus 550 in my opinion. And that's the only way I would advise playing this fight. Now, again, tinfoil hat theory throwing out there. Going into round 2, if you can get Li at anything better than plus 500, I would take a little bit of a shot just to kind of, go along with that narrative of Chimaev possibly not being ready to go a full 15 minutes if he needs to. Again, COVID situation, long layoff, all that type of shit. Again, we haven't even seen him go into the second and third rounds like legitimately against legit competition. And I give, Li that legit competition type of title. So I think he could give some good resistance to Chimaev here. He's a stalker, a good pressure, big shots that he throws on the feet. And if Chimaev's not able to complete takedowns, the later that this fight goes, he could potentially be in some trouble himself. So I'm not fading Chimaev. I'm not betting Li in this spot. The only way I would bet Li is probably on the live line if he's better than plus 500 going into round 2. But if you are backing Chimaev, I would consider taking the under 1.5 at even money, or even Chimaev inside the distance at minus 165 compared to paying that heavy chalk. And again, don't know about a lot of the questions that we have regarding Chimaev going into this fight. So official prediction, Chimaev first round TKO, but I am staying away from this fight. I just want to see what Chimaev looks like in his return. Alexander Volkov versus Marcin Tybura. We got minus 280 on Volkov and plus 240 the return on a streaking Marcin Tybura. Now, I believe Tybura is on a 5-fight winning streak. However, this is going to be his toughest test to date. Not to mention, it seems like in almost every fight, well, at least his last 3 fights specifically for Tybura, he's been hurt in every single one of them, but luckily he's able to come back, maybe land a takedown and evade further punishment, and then eventually get a finish or a solid dominant victory of his own. He's looking good. He's looking the best he's ever looked, to be honest, right? He's doing a good job in terms of mixing up his strikes and landing takedowns and kind of controlling his opponents from on top, but I think he's going to have a lot of trouble in terms of getting Volkov to the ground here. Like, I think he's a mediocre wrestler, but I think that dealing with the height, the distance, and the size of Volkov is going to be very difficult. And Volkov, in that Blades fight, did a pretty decent job in terms of working back to his feet. There's a reason that Blades had as many takedowns as he had in that fight, is because Volkov just kept finding his way back to his feet. And I think that Tybura will start to slow down if he's not successful with having, with getting takedowns and maintaining top position. Because if he's stressing out and if he's focusing on just trying to push and hold down Volkov, he's really going to drain his energy reserves, and I think it's going to be bad news for him, especially when it's in the striking realm. I think it might take maybe a round or so for Volkov to get comfortable with the distance, maybe shuck off a couple of takedowns and finally let his strikes go. But after that, I think it's going to be absolutely one-way traffic on the feet here. Volkov will be just keeping him to the body over and over again, landing strikes from the outside, maybe landing a head kick or two, but I do think he's the better fighter in this situation. The only way I see Tybura winning this fight is if he's proactively landing takedowns, which he might be able to land one or two early in this fight, but I think the longer that it goes, it's going to get harder and harder for him to do so. Like, he was struggling to get some of his past opponents down, and that's not a good look, especially when you're going against a Volkov who's going to be all of 280 pounds come fight night. And I think, his improving takedown defense and his improving get-up game is going to spell bad news for Marcin Tybura. So this could be a possible live betting opportunity as well, right? Take Volkov going into the second round if Tybura does have success in that first round, because I think it's only going to get harder and harder for Tybura to do that. And then, like I said, on the feet, I think it's, for the most part, one-way traffic with Volkov just doing his work from distance. And I truly think he'll be able to get Tybura out of there as well. So I like me some Volkov. I like me some Volkov inside the distance. And I've kind of been big on Tybura in the past, but I think stylistically speaking, this is going to be a very difficult fight for him, especially if he's not able to secure takedowns. Like, it's one thing to take down and control a 205er like Maxim Grishin. It's a whole nother thing trying to take down a guy like Volkov and control him as well. So I like Volkov here. I like him inside the distance. So the official prediction is going to be Volkov via second round TKO. Islam Makhachev versus Daniel Hooker. We got minus 600 on Islam Makhachev and plus 450 the return on short notice Daniel Hooker. If you guys remember, Makhachev was supposed to face Rafael Dos Anjos. Dos Anjos pulls out once again, and in steps Daniel Hooker, who just picked up a victory not too long ago over Nasrat Haqparast. Pretty lopsided 3-round decision where he was able to pick apart Haqparast from the outside. Now, he's going to have to do the same thing here if he wants to find success against Makhachev, but I find it very difficult that he's going to be able to stop takedowns or even land a big enough shot on one of those entries from Makhachev to be able to get him out of there. Does he have no chance? I'm not saying that, you know what I mean? But I think the best way to take Hooker in this fight would be either, inside the distance, right? There's no way he wins minutes in this fight. There's no way he keeps it competitive enough in the grappling, right? I don't think he keeps this fight vertical at all. I'm just trying to find the Hooker inside the distance line here, which currently sits at plus 675. If you want to get a little crazier, Hooker by KO plus 850, plus 1100, depending on the spots that you're looking at. But those are his best ways to win this fight, right? Makhachev's only blemish on his record was getting knocked out by Adriano Martin, several years ago. And since then, he's really shored up his striking. He looks a lot more comfortable in the striking realm. And I think it's going to be difficult for Daniel Hooker to, really establish success in the striking here. I think he's going to pretty much get every kick and punch countered with a takedown attempt, and I think he'll find himself on his butt pretty quickly thereafter. I never really advise anybody to parlay somebody up in that minus 600, minus 700 range, because, there's always that banana peel thing. So I would suggest, maybe just staying away from this fight. Like, I'm still trying to figure out the method of victory here for Makhachev. I think he wins by decision, which currently sits at minus 105. His inside the distance line is roughly around plus 150. I don't know if he'll get Hooker out of there. I don't know if he'll ground and pound him, whatever it may be. But he's good enough that he could do that. I just don't know if he'll be able to do that. And another qualm that I have on the Hooker side of things is the fact that he took it on short notice, right? He's clearly doing the UFC a favor. He's clearly getting paid handsomely to take this opportunity. But for the biggest fight in your career, you cannot be taking it on short notice. You need, a full training camp, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it may be, drilling takedown defense, drilling the fact that you're fighting a guy like Islam Makhachev, not 1 month. Right, if I'm not mistaken, it was UFC 266 that we saw Daniel Hooker at a month and a half ago. Like, I just don't think that's enough time to prepare properly for a guy like Makhachev. And just, let's not even talk about the fucking travel issues that Hooker has had, the fact that he's not even with his training camp or whatever the fuck it may be, his training partners, all that stuff. Like, it does not bode well for Hooker in this spot. So I'm going... As a prediction, I'm going to go with Islam Makhachev, and I'm going to take him to win this fight via decision. Time for the co-main event, and we have the bantamweight scrap on the line. Actually, it is an interim bantamweight title fight between Petr Yan and Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen obviously stepping in on short notice for Aljamain Sterling, who had to pull out because he just couldn't get medically cleared. Apparently, he had a neck surgery a couple months back and has yet to be medically cleared by medical staff, obviously, to actually compete at MMA, but seems to be training at a pretty high level. So until he can get his clearance, he won't be able to step inside the cage. And people may make of that what they want in terms of saying that Aljamain Sterling is afraid of fighting Petr Yan at this point. But again, if you're not cleared by medical staff, it's not in his hands at all. So we need to drop that narrative. Now, getting into this fight with Corey Sandhagen, this is probably the best fight at bantamweight you can currently make between guys that are probably the best in the division, with the exception of Corey Sandhagen. He does have some flaws on the ground that he needs to shore up, and obviously Aljamain Sterling was able to take full advantage of that. But skill-wise and stylistically speaking, I think that this is Petr Yan's toughest test to date, especially if he doesn't look to take a wrestle-heavy approach, which is what I think he needs to do here to be able to be successful. Now, this is a very polarizing matchup, as there's a very emphatic, statements on both sides. But I think that a lot of people, well, actually, not even a lot of people, because a lot of people believe that Petr Yan deserves to be minus 250, minus 300, even minus 500 to a certain extent, which I just don't agree with at all. I've taken a plus 205 shot on Corey Sandhagen for 1 unit in this fight. And that's in hopes of thinking that Petr Yan is going to approach this fight from a striking heavy style, which is what he mainly does, right? It's not often that you see him, relentlessly going for takedowns and trying to grind fighters out. The best parts of his work actually come to fruition on the feet. Now, here against Corey Sandhagen, that might be an issue for him if he goes out there and tries to kickbox with him for 25 minutes, especially considering the output that he's going to be getting from the Corey Sandhagen side. Shout out to my guy, MMA by the numbers, but one of the statistics that he put out there was that Corey Sandhagen from distance attempts about 16.5 strikes per minute from the outside, which is absolutely crazy. And I think that's exactly what Petr Yan is going to have to deal with in this fight. Now, there are a couple Petr Yan fights, if you go back and watch and you're like, okay, this is a lot closer than I remember, or a lot closer than people are making it seem, right? You go back to the Jimmy Rivera fight, everybody's like, oh, they see 29-28 and 30-27 all over for Petr Yan. But if you go back and watch that fight, man, Jimmy Rivera was easily winning those first 4 minutes in the first 2 rounds until the point that he got rocked. And it always seemed to come when he was like backing up to the cage and then just found himself there and just continuously kept getting clipped there. But he was, out voluming Petr Yan. He was landing the better strikes. He was having some success with leg kicks. And then in the 3rd round, he clearly won that round, in my opinion, as well. So, again, it's just small things, small high variance things that Petr Yan benefited from in that fight, which allowed him to get the decision in that. Then let's move on to the Jose Aldo fight. When you saw Aldo finally get comfortable in that 2nd round, start to let his strikes go, start to let the volume go and get the output up there, he had success against Yan and he won that round. Then we saw the infamous cardio death from Jose Aldo come into play, and obviously he fell off pretty quickly, and Petr Yan was able to finish him in that last round. The Aljamain Sterling fight. Sterling had a great game plan, in my opinion, which was crowd Yan. Keep throwing strikes, keep active, stay on the outside, stay away from trouble, but just keep giving Yan something to think about, because it seems like at times that Yan needs that space and that time to truly get set up to let his strikes go. And Aljamain gave him everything in that fight. Unfortunately, Aljamain just didn't have the cardio to keep up with it. And that was the problem in that fight, in my opinion. Now you have a guy in Corey Sandhagen who can do all those things that Jimmy Rivera, Jose Aldo, and Aljamain Sterling are able to do, but has the defensive tactics in terms of staying away from big strikes to do so, and the cardio to do so as well. So now we have the best archetype to fight a guy like Petr Yan, and the way that Petr Yan's been winning. But it's just about the takedowns and the grappling. That's my cause for concern here, and which is why I'm not going heavier on Corey Sandhagen in this spot. But given everything that we know pre-tape, I feel as though that this fight should be lined a lot closer. Again, Petr Yan doesn't necessarily always chase takedowns or try to grapple fuck opponents. He wants to go out there and be the better striker, and he wants to try to knock you out. And if he tries to do that here for 25 minutes against Corey Sandhagen, he could easily lose minutes. He could easily lose on volume and output. And that's kind of my argument for this fight. So yeah, Can Petr Yan look his price tag? Yes, if he implements grappling. But if he doesn't and tries to strike with Corey Sandhagen for 25 minutes, I think he's in for trouble, and I think he, maybe gets caught with something, but I also think that Corey Sandhagen will be the better minute winner as well, which will obviously have a lot to do, especially if this fight gets to the judges' scorecards, which I think it will end up doing. So my lean is, my pick is Corey Sandhagen. I am picking against Petr Yan once again, and I did pick Aljo last time as well, so say what you want about that, but he threw out the exact game plan that I wanted him to do, and he won 2 rounds on one judge's scorecards, one round on this on 2 judges' scorecards. But I think that Corey Sandhagen will be more successful in doing that. Again, the volume is going to be Jan's kryptonite, and I think that will ultimately be his downfall in this fight. So I'm going to go Corey Sandhagen. I'm going to pick him by decision, and if you want to unsubscribe and do all that shit just because of this pick, go for it. But I have to watch the tape, come to my own conclusions, and then give you what I see. And that's what I see. I see Corey Sandhagen winning a volume-based decision as long as he doesn't get grapple fucked by Petr Yan, which is absolutely a possibility. But it's hard to rely on that for Petr Yan, given that that's not what he normally does. He'll go for takedowns and you do all that type of stuff, but he doesn't grapple fuck opponents. That's not his approach. We'll see if he tries to change that this weekend, though, given the task that he has at hand. But my pick and my bet this weekend is going to be Corey Sandhagen. Took him 1 unit plus 205, and I think he gets it done via decision. Time for the main event. We got the light heavyweight strap on the line here. We got Jan Blachowicz going up against Glover Teixeira in a fight that all the fans have been clamoring for, especially with the amount of success that Glover Teixeira has been having over his last couple fights. In terms of odds, we're looking at minus 280 on Jan Blachowicz and plus 240 on Glover Teixeira, and I think that's roughly about right. But you could possibly say that there is some value on Teixeira on that line. I think the best way for Teixeira to win this fight is try to drag this fight to the ground and implement that heavy top crushing power that he has with his jiu-jitsu and possibly either get control time, a ground and pound finish, or a submission on the ground. But if he's not able to keep the fight on the ground against a pretty high-level jiu-jitsu player himself in Blachowicz, I don't think Blachowicz is on Glover's level, though, in terms of jiu-jitsu, so let me just throw that out there. But I think it's good enough and probably better than, the types of jiu-jitsu Glover Teixeira has been going up against over his last couple fights. That's not even... Well, let's add in the fact that we have the Polish power to rely on here from Jan Blachowicz, who's been starching some of the fighters in his last couple fights and finding a newfound confidence in his power to go out there, try to put his hand and his fist on the chin of his opponents and seeing them go night-night. And I think that's absolutely live for him to do so here against Glover Teixeira. I think if Blachowicz gets Glover into trouble, I think he'll be much better in terms of getting him out of there compared to what other opponents have been able to kind of muster up, right? Ivan Kutalaba, Carl Roberson, even in his last fight against Thiago Santos, there were so many times where they had Glover Teixeira in trouble, but Glover's takedowns always bailed him out, and he was able to, get the fight back into his realm and do work from there. But Blachowicz, solid cardio, something that you can't say about Thiago Santos or Anthony Smith, especially in those fights, and good jiu-jitsu, decent get-ups, and then obviously the Polish power. You got to believe that Blachowicz should be able to get this fight done. I don't have uber confidence on this because Glover always somehow pulls it out of his ass, and I have been able to cash on it a couple times with him as a big dog, but I just can't seem to pull the trigger this weekend, as I believe that Blachowicz will have too much for him on the feet. I do think that Blachowicz will find that knockout at a certain point in this fight, and I think there is just too much risk with Glover given how slow plodding he is, and I think that if he gives any moments for Blachowicz on the feet here, he'll probably be staring up at the lights in this fight. So add in new baby factor as well for Blachowicz fighting for his baby as well. That's another added incentive here. Again, not a huge point as to why you should be betting Blachowicz in this fight, but again, in terms of motivation, you got to think it's at an all-time high for Blachowicz in this spot. I think the odds are a little bit out of whack, but I just don't have the cojones to go out there and lay that plus 250 on Glover in this spot. Again, the fan in me hopes that he pulls it off. It's a great Cinderella story, of course, especially all the trials and tribulations he had getting to the UFC. But then since then, having a bit of an up and down UFC career and now finally getting to the point where he can get another title shot in a much more favorable matchup compared to when he had to go up against John Jones way back at UFC 170, whatever the fuck it was. But I still lean Blachowicz here. I'm going to go Blachowicz. I think he puts that Polish power on him, and then he gets Teixeira out of there. So I'm going to go Jan Blachowicz. Let's say second. You know what? Let's say first round KO. And that's a wrap on the breakdowns. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that like, hit that subscribe. And if you guys want to show your boy a little bit more love, check out the Patreon. $5 a month and get the best bang for your buck on the market, in my opinion. And then obviously shout out to Coolbet as well. Use promo code MMALOTN2 and then match your initial deposit up to $200. All right, hopefully we can get some money off this 267 event so that we can go into next week at UFC 268 with a little bit more change in our pocket and a little bit more swagger in our step so we can put some more green into our pockets, baby. Appreciate you guys checking out the episode again. I got a full week of content coming for you guys again. Thursday, propping you up with Cody. Friday, Ultimate Weigh-In Show. I might as well announce it for you guys here since it might already be out. I'm going to have my guy Olivier Obama, CA PFL competitor, former UFC fighter as well. He's going to help me break down the fights for you guys this weekend. So make sure you guys check out that stream Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then on fight day, again, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time is the prelim start time. So I'm going to have to get up nice and early so that I can do a fight day live chat for you guys. So look out for the start time of that over the next couple days. I'm guessing I'm going to have to get my ass up at 8 a.m. or something like that to do it for you guys, but we'll see how it goes down, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Otherwise, good luck in your bets this weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.